Hey, welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates, for the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rain and Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Saul, welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. So for the listeners, I'm delighted to welcome Saul Wainwright, who's based in Cape Town. And as we're recording this, he has a beautiful view of the ocean and a lovely South African summer. And I am facing frosty and -3. So that's the different worlds we're living in right now. But I'm delighted to have Saul, who is the Chief Financial Officer for the SunExchange, which I'm going to let Saul explain because it's such a cool concept. But Saul's background is really, really varied, but over 20 years experience helping lots of young companies from tech, manufacture, retail, mainly in the back office, FinOps kind of solutions area. And what we really want to talk about today is the challenges around impact funding, especially in sort of today's ecosystem. But Saul, firstly, I would love you to explain to the listeners a little bit more about the SunExchange.
Sure. Thank you so much, Rona. Yeah, so the SunExchange has been around since about 2016. We're a tech platform that enables individuals anywhere in the world to become part owners of solar power plants in the emerging markets of the world. Our ambition is to have solar power plants built all around the world so that you as a owner of power plants can earn a revenue stream from your power production around the world 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Our particular focus up to this point has been on high social impact businesses. So we focused on schools, retirement villages, agriculture, and small and medium enterprises. And we enable those enterprises and schools and whatnot to go solar for zero capital upfront and pay a lower than the public utility rate for their electricity. So we both help businesses lower their operating costs while reducing the carbon emissions of the South African grid, which is one of the most carbon intensive grids in the world. The company came out of the original inspiration of the founder, who is Abraham Cambridge, who came to South Africa from the UK, where he built a couple solar companies. And he was flying into Cape Town, looking at all the rooftops and wondering why no one had solar when you're sitting in one of the sunniest places in the world. Soon he figured out that problem was really getting access to capital. How can schools, small businesses and the like get access to affordable capital and run and maintain a solar power plant? So after exploring the market and seeing that there were none of those solutions, he landed on the idea of marrying a crowdfunding type environment with a crypto environment so that you could make micropayments, rental income, and distribute it around the world. And that's how we landed up with this tech platform. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we've built close to 70 power plants on about most of those, about close to half of those have been on public schools, mostly in the Western Cape. We now have 40,000 people in 180 countries that participate in our platform, and about 8,000 to 9,000 of them are active owners of power plants. As it stands now, SunExchange is really well positioned to expand tremendously. We have a huge pipeline where, the ongoing energy crisis in South Africa, where we have currently we're dealing with about 8 to 10 hours a day of no power throughout the grid. And so there's a real urgency to bring in solar and storage solutions. And the conversation really starts shifting away from cost savings to reliable power. And the only way you can do that is starting to bring in storage. So there's been a really big push in towards batteries and bringing storage in, which will, over the medium term, impact the broader grid in a positive way. So SunExchange stands at this intersection where it's about to really expand. It's looking to bring in more funders into our mix, more individuals, more corporates to fund our growing pipeline.
Amazing. So to kind of keep it really simple, if I wanted to, I could kind of fund a couple of solar panels, because you do it by panel, don't you? And you can, and then I can basically potentially earn an income from that ongoing. And that's how you're able to do it capital free, I guess, for the communities locally.
Yeah, so basically you as a buyer would come to the platform and you can buy as many. We actually do it on a solar cell basis, so it can be as cheap as £3, £4, £5. And you can come and buy one solar cell, or you can buy 100 solar cells or 1,000 solar cells, or as many as you want in that project. And you then essentially renting that solar panel to the energy consumer who's paying you a monthly rental income, and you receive that monthly rental income, and you can receive it in South African rands or in Bitcoin, or you can accumulate it and reinvest it and grow your total asset base of revenue generating solar. So it's available to anyone at a very, very low entry cost.
And just out of interest, just thinking out loud, is anyone kind of getting to the point where they're giving their solar panels to the actual communities themselves? Because I guess essentially it's okay for people who can afford to fund them or buy them and earn an income, but what's the kind of balance going forward around actually the people themselves owning their own solar cells, so they've got control over that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and it's something we're beginning to explore. What would it look like to put together a kind of a donor-based model in the EU environment and in the UK that enabled that? So what we've done to begin that is we've reached out into the more corporate sector. So we have some big corporate players who are coming and donating some of their donor funds or their CSR funds or their carbon offset funds into a high social impact project. So identifying poor schools or retirement or other businesses in areas that are energy compromised or cost compromised. And so, yes, there is that. Now you can also choose to donate all of your revenues to an identified nonprofit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the school gets the direct benefit of it. The important thing, though, to remember is that somebody still has to pay something every month, because that is an asset that needs to be maintained and cared for. So there are operating costs. It is a power plant as opposed to a wall or a driveway or even some kind of other infrastructure. So there's always somebody has to pay something. But yes, we've done projects with schools where large corporates have come in, donated 99% of the funds, and we're able to sell that electricity for very, very cheap to the school to just operating costs.
Awesome. And so I guess for a lot of people who don't really know about what you touched on earlier about load shedding, I believe it's referred to, we don't really hear about it here in the UK on the news. But if you could explain just in brief what what it means when you say we don't have any power for 8 to 10 hours a day, and how that's impacting everyone across South Africa.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think it's similar to what you guys have experienced, or your government has warned you you're going to experience in the depth of winter, where just basically the public utility cannot generate sufficient power to meet the demand of the grid, of the economy. And that's happening on a daily basis in South Africa. So we have many megawatts, a gap between the demand and the supply. And that gap means that the utility cannot provide sufficient power to meet everyone's demands. And if they left the grid on completely, the demand would outstrip the supply and collapse the grid. And if a grid collapses, it takes you several weeks to bring a grid back up. So what they're doing now is essentially rolling blackouts. So in neighborhoods around the country, they switch off supplying power to certain parts of the grid. And we have a little app that you can go look at, and it says you're going to lose power today from 2 to 4, 12 to 6. Then, you're on stage, and they move through different stages depending on how much demand and supply there is. It's a sad state of affairs. And it means for a lot of businesses, they literally cannot operate. So a coffee shop can't make its espressos, an ice cream shop can't keep its ice cream frozen, a bottling company can't keep its furnaces going to create bottles, a brewery can't keep making beer because it can't, keep its digesters going. So it impacts all through the economy in multiple ways and stacks up. Schools can't operate. Hospitals struggle to meet they have to run generators. So now they're running diesel, and the costs of diesel have gone through the roof as the global economy has gone through its struggles. So it just kind of, it's like a cancer into the economy.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I read a lot about is this: look, solar can in no way give enough power to replace fossil fuels. Now, obviously, you're in a really unique situation at the moment. We were lucky; we've had a very mild winter. We've had a couple of weeks that were pretty brassic. But we've not yet got to that point where that supply and demand. But what's your thoughts on is it just skepticism because we don't want to move away from fossil fuels, or actually is the move to solar at the minute is really just bridging a gap between the increased demand from global consumption? So how do you see it as a business really shifting that dial away from carbon intensive to, more sustainable energy?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know specifically, but I'm pretty sure that the world could supply its energy demands probably through solar. Whether that solar could all be deployed in Europe to meet Europeans' energy demands, or it'd have to be deployed in the Sahara Desert and piped across, I don't know. But I think that the only way to really think about it is an energy mix. So it's about being site specific. So does it really make sense for British people to put solar panels on their roofs? No. You get much more bang for your buck if you put solar panels on roofs in Africa and reduced Africa's energy and carbon intensive demands, and maybe kept using natural gas there because your system already kind of is built around that, and bringing other efficiencies. When you look at Africa, you're talking about environments where there aren't grids. What are people doing? They're chopping down trees and using coal. Where if you could put a solar panel in South Africa or a solar panel in London, you're going to offset 1 kilogram per kilowatt hour in South Africa, and in England you might offset half as much carbon, and you'll get half as much power. So, maybe England's better for wind. Maybe there are other options. So I think the best way to think about it is an over-reliance on a single solution is a problem. A diversified energy mix is a far more robust and resilient system. It reduces political, economic tensions because you're like, well, fine, we don't need to take all of X's oil because we can shift our load over to this kind of energy. So I think that a creative approach to the problem rather than one that's driven by vested interests is probably the best way to get to a solution.
No, absolutely. And I guess from an African point of view or an emerging markets point of view, the great thing is you haven't got infrastructure. So therefore, you're not trying to navigate through a system that's so historical in what you've got. So actually, if the emerging markets can develop their power, energy, health, education by, I guess, our mistakes, our failures, or whatever we might want to call it, what we thought we were doing the right things, then is it fair to say that now the price of solar is at such a price that we can build infrastructures in emerging markets in a cost-effective way? Because it is more expensive now to maybe build those communities through a classic electrical infrastructure.
Correct. You can't deploy that easily in Africa. You don't have a grid. So most of Africa lacks grids. And in order to build large power plants, whether they be fossil fuel based, nuclear based, and even large scale solar utility, you've got to have high voltage distribution lines. You've got to build huge infrastructure. Africa doesn't have that, and it's very, very dispersed. It's a huge continent with huge open space in between urban populations. So you can't reliably do that. And if you take what scientists are saying about the timeline we have to begin offsetting carbon emissions, you can't take 20 or 30 years. How long did it take Europe to build its grid and North America to build its grid? A long time, right? And it was a combination of private and public and, all kinds of machinations to get to what it has today. My view in this, and I was in Davos last year, and I was sitting at a table with a bunch of people from around the world, and they were talking about smart grids and European renewable energy, all of which I think is valuable. And I raised the counter. I was like, look, if you guys deployed that 20 billion euros you're going to do to smart grid into emerging markets where people are using coal and diesel and wood and gave them solar, you might have a much bigger impact on the carbon emissions of the total world. And then the counter's like, well, Europeans and Americans have the largest footprint because they're the biggest consumers. Agreed, but most of the carbon that Europeans' carbon footprint is in the supply chain. Where does most of your goods come from? The emerging markets, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the further counter is, okay, fine, build solar for yourselves, but then mine that out of Europe. Build lithium mines and cobalt mines and whatnot in Europe. Because what's happening now is that they're mining in the Congo and the environmental devastation is huge. Nobody's really paying attention to that. And so, I think these things are always more complex than we like to look at the front end. And our view at SunExchange is it makes the best sense to deploy carbon-free or carbon-reduced energy supply in emerging markets where you've got the youngest populations, where you've got the fastest growing economies, where you've got the biggest impact on supply chains, and you can have the most immediate impact without disrupting anything that's existing.
No, I totally agree. And I think as part of our duty to let the global south grow, it makes sense that actually if we're going to move to all these battery, solar, wind, and we need raw materials from mining, which guess what, we're not going to find them here, then yes, that should be at least in some way a counterbalance of building that structure there to mine. So anyways, I know we could go down a rabbit hole on this one, but no, I absolutely agree. Listen, something I wanted to replay back to you, it's something that triggered why I wanted to chat to you. And it was really a statement around kind of the challenges that we face for funding. And we touched on it a little bit just then. Really, it's about in a way, a lot of self-centeredness, isn't it? It's like, I've got to reduce my carbon. It's my numbers, and I'll outsource it and pretend that didn't happen, and supply chain, all of these things. But something that was said when a group of us was chatting was that investors still want exit strategies. They want multiples and a sure thing. In the end, impact and ESG don't get funded. Investors still focus on returns, and the risk for them is losing their money, not environmental impact or ESG. As brutal as that sounds, that's the harsh reality when we're looking at funding. So how do you, as a CFO, working in a business that's DNA is about impact and, solar energy, how do you keep motivated every day? What sort of conversations are you having to turn the dial of that way of thinking?
It's to answer that, I'm going to kind of step back a little bit in my own trajectory, right? So, I've always wondered around how economies grow and what motivates economies and businesses and individuals to be successful or to build things in certain environments. And this came out of a very early kind of juxtaposition I experienced. I grew up in South Africa until I was about 15, and I moved from Cape Town to the United States, to San Francisco. And I went to high school there and university and everything. And it really kind of was jarring to see one part of the world that was at one stage of economic development. And even within it in South Africa, there's multiple stages. And then you go to America and you see something very different. And so I was completely fascinated by what are the motivating factors in there. And I went on and I studied political economics at Berkeley, and I, did research into the movement of South African companies into the rest of Africa on the back of the idea of African Renaissance, which was Thabo Mbeki's idea of almost impact investing. And this was the beginning of impact investing. The idea of triple bottom line really came out of South Africa in the King reports and the effort to start looking at how do you utilize vehicles of the state at that time to create more social development, and how do you measure that, and what are the factors and all of that. So this conversation, is 25 years old kind of thing, right? And I journeyed through that, and living in the Bay Area in the early 2000s, there was a real rise around impact investing and social capital markets, and that whole principle was really, really growing. And I worked with a bunch of organizations at that time, trying to figure it out. And it was in the Bay Area, and it was really about, we're trying to use money to solve problems, and we're trying to build better work cultures, and we're trying to, there are all these problem solving, like really focusing business on problem solving. And I spent, 10 plus years, 15 years in Silicon Valley doing this. And eventually, I got really despondent by the situation in Silicon Valley, because it started really moving away from, wow, how can technology and money and all of these ideas solve real problems in the world, to how do we sell more Levi's on Instagram? Oh, that's a problem. Let's solve that. Oh, how do we help people organize their paperwork better? Oh, let's solve that problem. All these weird things that are problems, but when you zoom out, you're like, really? Is that a problem? Like, maybe we're focusing on the wrong problem. But oh, look, there's all this money piling into solving these problems that aren't real problems. Meanwhile, in the background, we're talking about environmental issues, human rights issues, all these big problems. And so, my wife and I decided at that point, like, you know what? Why stay in the Bay Area? You have to learn lots of money, working for companies that aren't really solving any problems. What's the purpose? Like, what am I really doing? I have this interest in the problems of the world and solving them, and how economies and businesses can do that. So we came back to South Africa with our kids, and I started looking for businesses here in South Africa that had kind of social impact. And the real interesting thing is when you look at the South African startup ecosystem is that a vast majority of the businesses are solving real problems that impact day-to-day lives, not business process efficiency problems, but how does a working mother living in a township get to her job in the city when she doesn't know when the taxis are going to run? Or can you build timetables that are tracking the movement of taxis so that people can plan their day and use their time more efficiently, so they're not spending 6 hours on public transport, maybe 3. Fast forward, I land up at SunExchange, and here's SunExchange, right? Trying to solve a real problem. Carbon emissions and schools without reliable power and a broken capital market. And so, what drives me every day is that I am working in a business that's actually solving problems. Like when we get a new project, right? When we get a new project and it goes live, and you've now helped this organization get access to cleaner, reliable power, and I've actually solved a problem. We as an organization solved 70 problems for 70 organizations that probably represent tens of thousands of people. That's the motivation, right? And that's different from my other experience. So it's just, for me, it's an alignment between a long-running historical passion and real-world, on-the-ground solutions being realized on a daily basis, almost.
And I guess as someone who kind of shares obviously ultimately those passions, we have seen a big shift. I think I'm just looking at some stats here. We have seen a huge shift in 2021 and 2022 into climate tech funding. However, whilst that is exciting, there's been nearly a 90% increase. It's are we able to look at that really and say, is this climate tech, a lot of the stuff that's, this tech that's going to save us, when actually we have got a lot of the answers already? So it's great that it's going in that trajectory. What I can't see from that really is what sort of tech that's going into. So one of the things that I was looking at recently was how, if we do know solar works, we do know that it's now as cheap to install as anything else. And also we've got, this carbon removal tech, which apparently can work. My question really is to the wider sort of governments, I guess, and communities is, why isn't this going absolutely everywhere? Why are you, effectively, and the business, why aren't you falling over people coming on your door and going, here's $1 million, here's an infrastructure, build this, build that, because we know it works? I can only conclude that for the last 500 years, be it consumerism or capitalism, always wins. So the minority pushing that focus of growth and profit seems to outstrip and win every time. How are we going to change that dial?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fundamental challenge that sits before, I think, the global economy and society. How do you direct capital towards things that may not show financial viability, but have social viability or environmental viability? And, as an economist, I understand why funders need to know that they're going to get a return, because the economy is built on, debt-based money that requires interest returns and inflationary offsetting. And you've just got, otherwise the system has lands up being fundamentally flawed as it stands now, as it's constructed now. Something in that construct needs to shift, right? And when we go out and we try to get funded. Now, there's two routes of funding that we explore. There's one that's, equity, fund SunExchange's operations, fund our crowdfunding tech platform so we can bring 1 million people, individuals to it, and 100,000 businesses around the world to build solar. That's one side of it. And then the other side is, hey, we've got all these people out here that need solar, and you can fund the solar projects. And on both sides of that equation, we have people analyzing risk from the point of view of profitability. And they're saying, well, maybe that business won't survive 5 years, or maybe you guys won't survive 5 years, or something like that. And then what? And so we need more money, or we can't do that, or we've got to do, and there are all these caveats. But many of these funders at the same time push themselves forward and say, we're around impact, and we want to, have a positive impact on the carbon future of the world and reduce carbon. That's their forward statement, but at the end, they want financial security, and for me, it's ultimately about what is the focus of the global society? What is the true risk that we're trying to mitigate? If we decide we believe the scientists, and they say you've got 5 years to reduce the carbon emissions by 50%.
Yeah.
Surely the risk you're calculating is, do we hit that 50% or not? Not, will this business be surviving in 5 years' time? Because, maybe the business won't survive, but the solar system will, and the solar system will still be producing power, and you can still push it into the grid, and, maybe you won't have any returns. But from what I can tell, if we don't solve this problem in 10 years, who cares what your returns are? Because the whole thing's going to go, it's going to blow up. The whole thing's going to start. All those businesses you think you knew were able to survive won't be able to survive, because the economy will shift, because the environment has shifted so much that agriculture is not happening in the way. There's droughts, there's floods, there's, So and I think that this same thing is, but the truth is we haven't changed this conversation much in the world, whether it be about human rights or pollution, or, the economy still looks for economically and financially viable solutions, irrespective of the externalized risks. And that I understand from the broader economy. What I can't understand is why funders in the sector that proclaim to want to focus on this impact don't elevate that in their analysis.
No, exactly. I
was going to say, I don't know. When I was younger, I thought I knew, but I've got older. Like maybe my ego, a little less ego. I don't know really how you change that, but in my view, it's a fundamental thing. This is like a philosophical thing. This is like the underpinnings of our society that has to shift. Otherwise, it's about economics. So don't tell me it's about ESG. Don't tell me it's about impact. Yes, you're interested in those things because that helps you market, and it differentiates a sector, and it does all these things. But you're not going to fund me because I show you I hit every SDG and my ESG program is spot on. But hey, I might only make 1% return. No. You're not going to that. You don't care. You're going to be like, I'm sorry, our mandate is a 12% return, so we can't get in there.
Exactly. And it's kind of, how do we navigate, say, if there's 100 impact investors in the world, actually, how many of those, are transparent with their kind of metrics of success, be that societal, environmental, and it's okay to have a 1% in there as well, to have great.
Totally. Or even more, if you can get more, right?
Making money and profit in the global south growing is absolutely something that
100%.
Needs to have. And I think that's sometimes what we can get slagged off about. People will often say, oh, you're not allowed to make profit in this. Well, no, you are allowed to make profit, but it's just this huge quick turnaround in time.
Well, let's be clear. SunExchange is a for-profit company, right? We are a for-profit company, and we try to deliver returns to the people that fund our solar projects. But what happens is somebody looks at a school or a non-profit and they say, well, they don't have any assets. We're not going to put solar on that thing. What if they don't pay? What am I going to do? I can't go claim any assets back. I'm going to be out. And I'm like, well, first, they need power. So why would they not pay for their power? They need it. Out of everything else, they need power. You can't do anything without power. Okay, right? Second, the history that if you look at microcredit markets and small bar, they pay. They have better repayment rates than other sectors. It's just that when you run their balance sheet through your credit rating profile that you developed for a European business, it comes out as a fail. But there's no social metric added to that.
Yeah.
No environmental metric that has a weight in that says, okay, you know what? We're pretty confident they'll pay. Out of our 70 power plants, we don't have anyone that defaults. We've only had people that have had some cash flow constraints that's based on seasonality, but everybody lands up paying. Because why? Because we're going to be switching off their power plant, and then what are they going to do? So,
exactly. And I guess if they're then being put in a position where, for a lot of these, they're maybe having power for the first time. I mean, wow, how empowering is that for them, their families, their children to be able to study, things like that across many different kind of human levels, I guess. That's going to be your priority for payment, not like the Western world where it's like, oh, I'll go and have my nails done and I might spend £3.50 on a coffee. So, yeah,
so,
I think it's like.
So I was just going to say, I think that one of the solutions we've been looking for that may help this marketplace, right, is because donor models in the emerging market are dangerous because they distort market prices, right? So if you have big donors coming in deploying lots of free solar, it's hard for other people to compete, or greatly subsidized solar. People that are trying to create real businesses struggle, right?
Right.
So you've got to be careful about distorting markets, and that's why a lot of African economies don't like the donor model, because it distorts the market and doesn't create viable free enterprise. That said, you could have the UN or the UK government, somebody could say, you know what, we're putting together a $20 billion insurance fund, and all the solar projects in those markets can apply for access to this insurance fund so that private investors can come to the party and say, okay, cool, we'll take on that risk. We think we're going to get 11%. But if that guy goes belly up, we've got this insurance to cover us for X amount. And, so it's like a global fund to enable private sector to operate with an insurance guarantee sitting behind it. So kind of like what banks have, right? In the US, they call it FDIC, right? I don't know what they call it in the UK, but I'm sure there's some kind of insurance, your first £100,000 or whatever it is, it's probably less, but, is insured. It's something like that. So it's first loss insurance. So, okay, cool. I'll at least get my initial investment back less what I've received already. Cool. I'm willing to work with that company because I have access to it. That's one solution that I haven't seen come about, because I think part of what's going on in the marketplace right now is that everybody's looking at these nice clean tech solutions that are being deployed in Europe and America to upgrade the grid to a smart grid, to put new meters on your house, to do this, to do that, all great things. But I bet you they're playing at the margin, but people are more comfortable with those markets. Versus in Africa and other parts of the world, you would have a much bigger direct impact on the energy supply, reduce carbon emissions, and electrify unelectrified regions, which lowers healthcare costs, which increases economic development, which helps children, girls, boys learn. Like, it has all these positive. No economy can grow without electricity. You have to have electricity in the economy.
No, 100%. And do you think, just kind of last question, but do you think that there is a fear globally that essentially we don't really want the global south to grow and have a basic level of healthcare, education, food, nutrition? Because for me, it's like, I can just imagine, what if the global south did get to that level, how would that fundamentally shift the way we work as a world? That sounds like a bit of a hard question to answer, but do you think there is a fear that we don't want the global south to grow?
Maybe a subconscious fear. I think maybe from like the big guy. Look, if the global south grows and reaches the same standards of living as the Europeans and Americans and consumes at the same, but we're up a creek. Like, that's not going to work, right? So the biggest fear would probably be that, yes, it could break the global economy in its current form. That maybe isn't the worst thing in the world.
Right.
But I think it's more, I just think that this is a long-running historical way in which the global north has looked at the global south, and the way our media and our political systems and our education have propagated certain views of the global south. As a little story around my experience around that, I'm a white guy from Africa. My family's lived here 6 generations. I moved to America. People don't consider me African. They consider me European, right? Fine. Okay. Then I go through the immigration process. I get my green card from the American government. It says country of origin, Africa. Not South Africa, Africa, right? That's a continent, not a country. But that's the mindset, right? When you talk to people, most Europeans and Americans don't understand, they maybe know about Cape Town, and then the rest is like Africa. It's like, there's nothing really there. There's nothing really going on except poverty and war. And I think that it's very simplistic, but in Africa, if you go to African cities, there's a real effort in Africa from the ground up trying to fight against that perception. We have our own arts, we have our own fashion, we have our own music, we have our own trajectories, and Kenya and Nigeria and Senegal and South Africa are different. And even within them, they're different. Just like Europe, France and Germany are different. But you guys are like right next door to each other. Yeah, but you're fundamentally different in the way you'd like to think and talk. The UK is a great example. It's a tiny little island. And I think, 7 different, peoples, So I just think it's a lack of that nuance. And so people think, so they don't see it as part of the problem nor part of the solution, I think.
I think it's a dangerous place to be, because there's not really that understanding or relevance of how amazing the continent of Africa is, because it is the biggest continent. It's bloody massive. And I've been privileged to travel in various different countries in Africa. I actually, as listeners will know, I actually got married in Africa. So I think, this boils down to 2 things for me. And I think one of them is education and awareness, and 2 is about systems change, I think, fundamentally. But listen, I could carry on talking about this and, going through this, but it's been amazing to talk to you. And I just want to say, if anyone wants to have a little look, please do go on the SunExchange.com. And as Saul kind of said earlier, you can go really, really small, or you can go really, really big. So personally or corporately, please do check these guys out. What they're doing is incredible. They've got all the case studies on the website as well. So thank you so much for coming on. I hope that we do see the dial shift. The reality is we've only got about till 2050, so 2030, if we're really lucky. But thank you so much for coming on and talking about the challenges that you face.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Road and Morale podcast. Have an awesome day, and see you next time.